Hola, hola, hola a todos. Soy Tasha, la dueña de Tasha Teaches Spanish, y este es otro episodio de Hablamos Español. Hey, everybody, my
Hola,
name is Tasha, and I have Shaun Skeete with me today. Hey, Mr. Skeete.
hola, ¿cómo estás,
Estoy
Tasha?
bien, gracias. Es un placer tenerte en el programa. Gracias.
También es un placer hablar contigo. Gracias
Yes,
por
sir.
invitarme.
Yes, sir. Well, to you, the viewer, thank you for viewing. If this is your first time, gracias por venir y bienvenido. Hablamos Español exists to shine a light on those who are contributing to that diversification of foreign language learning. And I said all that to say that so often as melanated individuals, we don't see ourselves learning other languages, and so therefore we don't think we can do it, but the world
It's
doesn't
true.
think we can do it as well. And so the
Yeah,
purpose of this program is to shine a light on the many of us who are out here learning, whether in the baby stages of beginning or intermediate, or they're at full fluency. So that's why we have Mr. Skeete with us today. Now, to you, the viewer, whether this is your first time watching or not, um, you are about to experience a conversation between Shaun and I. We're going to do his introduction in Espanol. So this gives you the opportunity to test out your knowledge. What do you know? What do you not know? Because oftentimes we
true.
know more than we realize. So this gives you a chance. After the interview is over, we'll do the same introduction in English. That gives you the chance to see what you got right. Also, please be sure to like, subscribe, all those other thousand things people tell you to do on YouTube. I would appreciate it as well. All right, so Mr. Skeete, let's dive in. So, sabemos que tu nombre es Shaun Skeete, pero ¿de dónde eres, Shaun?
Bueno, yo soy de Queens, New York. Yo nací para acá, pero mi familia es de Trinidad y Tobago. Entonces, yo, yo me considero un trinitense, en inglés
Sí.
Trinidadian American. Entonces, yo soy caribeño, pero también americano.
Ok, naciste aquí, pero los orígenes de la familia son en el Caribe.
Es decir, que yo soy americano de nacimiento y trinitense de corazón.
Ah,
Y de mi
comprendido.
sangre también, claro.
Sí. Ok. ¿Y tu trabajo o trabajos, pero qué haces?
Bueno, como soy caribeño, yo tengo como dos o tres trabajos. Entonces, un puesto mío es que yo soy ingeniero de audio en
Oh,
vivo.
ok.
Entonces, yo trabajo con espectáculos, con shows, eventos, pero también yo trabajo con computadores en el aspecto de la inteligencia artificial.
Ujú.
Y yo no puedo decirte tanto porque ya tenemos como NDAs y contratos y todo eso.
Ok,
¿Verdad?
sí, sí. Ok, muy bien. Parece que, pues, suena, en mi opinión, que tú te gustan las cosas técnicas, más o menos.
Exacto,
Sí.
exacto, sí.
Muy bien. Ok, continuamos. Mencionaste tu familia ya y sus orígenes, pero díganos un poco de tu familia, niños, esposa, todo, hermanos, ¿cómo quieres?
Ok, bueno, la ama de la casa es de Jamaica, es decir, que es jamaiquina. Y mi hijo también, yo tengo un hijo de 8 años, él casi va a cumplir 9 años este año. Y bueno, somos una gente que, you know, siempre estamos en la casa, pasando tiempo con nosotros mismos, hablando mutuamente, disfrutándonos con las
Hola
películas.
a tu niño, a tu hijo, hola.
Oh,
Hola, una
sí.
sorpresa. ¿Y cómo
Y
te
él,
llamas?
tu nombre, your name.
Oh, Nasir?
Mucho gusto, Nasir. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Gracias,
Ok,
gracias.
dame un segundito porque yo estoy haciendo esa entrevista.
That was perfect
Entonces,
timing.
yeah. Entonces él también está aprendiendo español, pero yo le enseño como los básicos ahora. Tú sabes que él me está luchando, peleando
Ujú.
conmigo porque todos sus amigos hablan en inglés. Entonces, tú sabes,
Sí, sí, no,
él
no,
ya
sí, es
está.
difícil. Mío tiene 2 años, ahora solo sabe los números hasta 20 y dos canciones, nada más.
Sí,
Pero claro, como él crece, sí va a continuar a ser difícil porque en la casa, pues en nuestra casa hablamos inglés, hablo español a veces, pero claro, él va a salir de la casa, entrar el mundo de inglés.
Y por
Entonces,
eso, sí.
siempre es un reto. Y como ellos crecen, a veces ellos, su interés, hay una falta de interés en el niño en saber español. Es como, mamá, tú sabes, pero yo no quiero saber.
Sí, porque tú sabes que cuando todo el mundo habla una cosa, ya ellos que tienen como una vergüenza de hablar algo diferente.
Sí, sí. Sí. Y a veces, especialmente cuando yo hablo con nativos de sus niños, y típicamente durante la adolescencia, ellos tienen
Sí,
a veces vergüenza.
vergüenza, sí.
Gracias. Pero no es hasta cuando ellos son adultos, de repente es como, oh, ay, yo tuve un tesoro en mi casa y ahora tengo 21 años y quiero aprender, pero
Es
sí.
cierto lo que tú dices, sí. Yo conozco mucha gente que me dice eso también.
Ok, continuamos.
Ok,
¿Tu canción favorita en español?
la República Dominicana o también Costa Rica.
¿Es tu canción favorita?
No, te escuché mal, entonces. Pensé que tú me
Canción.
preguntaste de la nación, mi nación favorita.
Oh, no, canción.
No, te oí mal, perdón. Mi canción favorita, bueno, depende de la música. Si estamos hablando de la bachata, Mi primer beso de Raulín Rodríguez. Eso es
Wow,
una canción que me
nunca he
toca
escuchado de
mucho.
eso.
Oh,
I'm
man,
good one up.
hay que buscar esa canción, de
Primer
verdad.
beso. Okay.
Sí, y también,
¿Cómo se llama
bueno,
él? ¿Cómo se llama el cantante?
Raulín, Raulin.
Rodríguez.
Sí, mi primer beso.
Ok, voy a escuchar a esto más tarde.
Claro.
Okay, ¿qué
Oye,
más?
las letras son muy profundas.
Oh,
Bueno, ¿qué más? En cuanto a la salsa, por ejemplo, a mí me encanta una canción que se llama ah, Llorará, de Oscar de León.
sí, sí, este hombre, y nunca he escuchado, pues, una vez supongo, pero nunca um, he escuchado con intención a esta canción, necesito, pero cuando yo aprendí de él, inmediatamente yo pensé, él parece con mi papá, porque mi papá no tiene, mira aquí donde está una foto. Mira, aquí, pues, este no es un buen ejemplo porque él parece más viejo, pero mi papá no tiene pelo, tiene el color de piel similar. No voy a mostrarte esta foto, otra. En un momento voy a encontrar, porque
Pero ya,
yo hice
entonces
una
tú eres
comparación.
familia del cantante.
¿Ah?
Entonces tú eres familia del cantante.
Sí, pero mi papá no cantó. Sí, pero
Mentira.
voy a mostrarte en un momento.
Ok.
Voy a mostrar. Puedo hacerlo ahora. Es muy rápido. Yo hice una comparación y la envié a mis hermanos. Un momentico, perdón.
Sí.
Gracias por tu paciencia. Y
No,
a
que
los
lo cojas suave.
espectadores también. Hold
Cógelo
on,
suave.
viewers. Hold on, viewers. Hang in there.
No,
Ok,
no te
aquí está.
preocupes.
Y en mi opinión, él parece como mi papá un poco.
Oh, es cierto, mira, es un calvo igualito.
Sí, el
No,
bigote.
es cierto que se
Sí,
parecen mucho, mucho.
sí, sí. Y por eso yo conozco Oscar de León. Pero sí. Ok. ¿Qué?
Llorará, sí.
Gracias.
You will cry.
Mi,
Llorará.
okay. Tu primer beso.
Ajá.
Ok. ¿Qué más?
Bueno, bueno, ¿qué música te encanta?
Salsa es mi preferencia. Pero
Okay.
me gusta, normalmente pregunto de una canción, pero me gusta que ahora tú estás hablando de los géneros diferentes. Ok, bachata, salsa. ¿Cuál es tu canción favorita del merengue?
Una buena pregunta. Son pájaros malos.
Otra vez.
Son pájaros malos. Es una canción de Moreno Negrón.
Sí está. Yeah.
Moreno Negrón. Es un grupo dominicano
Tengo muchas cosas a aprender. Ay, ay, ay. ¿Quién eres? Ok. Es suficiente. Tengo 3 canciones
está
ahora.
bien. Está bien.
Uh, ¿Y qué más? La última pregunta. Si tienes o si tengas tu cantante favorito de español, ¿quién canta en español? Cantante.
Si yo qué?
Tu cantante favorito.
Oh, bueno, mi cantante favorito. Héctor Lavoe.
Sí, el cantante de los cantantes.
Es cierto. No, él tiene como un estilo que es muy único.
Y las historias, los cuentos de sus canciones. Es como, a veces no quiero bailar porque puedo
Sí,
pensar, la
porque
historia es
se
muy
tiene que
triste.
escuchar, es
Sí,
verdad.
la
Tiene que
historia es muy
escucharla.
triste, pero la música.
Es por eso, de vez en cuando yo estoy bailando y que me detengo, digo, para escuchar. Es like, wow, porque
Quiero, al mismo tiempo quiero llorar y bailar.
es cierto. No, es la verdad.
Sí, él es mío, los 2 favoritos son él y Celia, pero
Ok, Celia también.
creo que me encanta más de sus canciones, las canciones de Héctor. Por ejemplo, mi canción favorita es El Día de Suerte. El Día de Suerte es mi favorita.
Bueno,
Entonces,
pues.
por fin conozco una artista que tú conoces.
Está bien.
Okay, and we're going to end it there. We're going
All
to
right,
finish.
man.
So thank you to the viewer. Hopefully you caught some things. If you didn't, don't worry. We're going to revise them and revisit them in the end. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And that was a nice conversation, Shaun. So I'm going to dive in with stuff I just want to know. I normally have a, nice little set list of questions, but this is just stuff about you I just want to know. So I'm going to dive in. Number
Okay.
one, with what we talked about earlier. So viewer, you're getting a heads up here. You gave me just 3 of the many forms of Latino music. Now, you're about to educate me because I honestly don't know. Can you tell me the difference between merengue, bachata, salsa? Because I hope it don't sound rude. It all sounds similar to me. I just dance. So is there a big difference?
No, it's not rude at all, honestly. It's mostly about the drums and the beats per minute, you can say. And that happens to our music all the time too. It's like trying to explain go-go to somebody versus other black musics, And if you hear it in passing, you might be like, it's similar, but there's differences. So, for example, la salsa, let's say all of them have African drum, right?
Yes.
La percusión africana. So salsa, you usually get at the slowest pace. It's not always slow, of course, but the rhythm is on a certain count, and you find people will dance it. They'll do it like on 2 salsa. They'll do it on 3. There's different counts that they'll drop on. There's also the fact that, like, let's say merengue, the dance is the rhythm is a do, do, do. It's like a 2 kind of 2-part percussion that happens back and forth.
Okay.
And I'd say la bachata, claro que sí, es la música romántica. Es algo más suave. It's it's what I would call slow jam music. La bachata.
Okay.
If you're gonna play that,
as you explain it that way, is that what Romeo Santos sings?
Claro que sí.
Because I can hear it.
De la bachata.
His little,
Yes.
little light
He's
voice.
like, You know, he'd be like Miguel or one of these people. You know,
Yeah.
he's singing to make sure that the ladies, you know, are listening, and the fellas, they don't have to say too much. He's singing for them. You know, so it's cool.
Yeah. So okay, I can that gives me a comparison. Thinking bachata Romeo Santos, and I can identify the difference there. Okay, that's
Right.
good. And this is another nugget for the viewer. But the way in which you just explained it, you know, it sounds like you obviously have connection with music. Do you think you were able to pick up on the differences because of you being an audio engineer? Is there a connection there, or is there some music history in your background?
Well, yeah. I work, of course, in live sound, but I actually arrived there because I was an artist myself. I grew up rapping, hip hop artist,
All right.
and my dad, you know, even though his work took him to different technical things too, he actually used to play in a band. So
Um,
when I was a child, he plays like the conga, he played the guitar, he played the piano. So the
yeah.
music in my house, I mean, I had Oscar de Leon in La Casa, and I didn't even know it, you know. And it's funny because
Yeah.
I have my dad's old album collection now, and I go through it, and I have these classic salsa records that he picked up from like the early '70s, late '60s, and so I just think musically in my house, my dad was so into everything that I kind of picked up on it too. You know, I mean, of course, we're Trinidadian, so if I'm not listening to rap myself, then it's going to be soca music, it's going to be calypso, you know, going to be reggae, maybe something like that. So it's just from a child, you always, in that kind of household, you're always hearing, you know, one rhythm, and then 5 minutes later, you hear a next one. So it just stands out so much to you.
That's good. That's good. So it's kind of in your blood. It's in you. It's a part of
It
who you
is,
are.
but I'd say it's so African. You know, we come with these drums, and if you really listen to it, you'll be like, I recognize it. I
That's
recognize
true.
it.
That's true. And you just brought up something else. I'm just gonna ask just because. So, viewer, if you haven't watched it before by now, I'm usually talking about Spanish, but Shaun, you coming with so much. You know, I just want to ask it all. You already mentioned something that I have zero education about, just learned about 6, 7 months ago. So you can educate me on this. Soca. When I first saw soca music, I felt like, or and dance. You can't see the music. Just kidding. When I first saw, videos from soca events, I just reminded myself of little old church women to be like, that's just those young people. Oh, it just reminded me of dances
Right.
we grew up doing and we were condemned for. And so I think I asked somebody in a group or something about a little bit about it, and they said it's more than that. It's a culture. It's something behind it.
It
So
really is.
what can you give me on soca? Because I need some assistance.
Okay. I mean, it's a tradition built from, you know, African culture. There's some European culture mixed in there as well. Um, you know, because of course we always had to practice some of our things in secret,
On the low, yes, sir.
or to make it look like something else, you
Yes,
know.
sir.
But generally, you could say carnival and the musics that support it are to, you know, pay respects to the ancestors. It's a day for you to be able to connect with those who came before you and to live on their behalf. You know, like you're here, you're on the earth, the things that they've done for you, that they've put down for you, and you kind of let free on that day. You know, I always thought carnival was a good way for, let's say, Caribbean people who are also descendants of slavery and the things that come from that. It's a way to let go and to sort of deal with a PTSD that builds up over time. And so
That's it.
you find in Trinidad and similar islands that have carnival the same. Even the people, like you said, the old church lady and the guy who is, you know, up the road, and he's always kind of like looking at the guys on the corner and saying, you know, you guys shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
that's that time of year where you find those same people dressing up, you know, in the traditional outfits. They play in mass. They're putting on the headgear and the headsets and everything like that. So it's really totally good. It's cool to see people who are like even so straight laced to be able to finally say, okay, I'm just partying and letting go at this point in time
Yeah.
and celebrating, you know, for those who came before me and the things that I'm going to do in the future. It's a celebration of life,
That's
of love,
good.
and of family. So
And and so this is something that I just thought about, and it's just really a discussion here. If you're going to contribute, fine. If not, but my reaction to Soca reminded me of the reaction I had when I first saw the video "La Negra Tiene Tumbao" by
uh,
Celia Cruz. So I had always heard the song, I
Ella sí
watched the
tiene
video.
tumbado.
I'm like, oh no, I can't, because I watched the video because I thought I was about to teach or show my student who's a teenager or a child, and
Right.
I watched. I can't show her this. So then I'm confused about why the central character in the video was so what I've known and grew up to be called as sexualized. And so
Mhm.
I put it in the group. I think we're both in melanated multilinguals. That's how we met. And somebody mentioned this, just the way in which we've been taught in the U.S. even about hips and swaying is off. And that
Correct.
there is a deeper connection. You were just mentioning it connects to our ancestors and things like that. And so when we see this, our first thought is sex because we've been I guess it's become perverted in our mind, but it goes deeper than that.
I would agree with that. I'd say maybe to even say we view it through a European lens. You know,
Mm,
I think that for me, I'm blessed because, like I said, I'm born here, so halfway I consider myself American, but then I had this total perspective. Everybody in my household come straight from the island. Um, I think that Europeans sexualized a lot of things that were quite normal for us before, because if you look at certain African cultures, depending on what ceremonies are going on, let's say, for example, growing up, you might see Channel 13 and the women are topless, and and you view it and you say, what's this? But it's because from the European mind, if you didn't have a shirt on, you were uncivilized, you were trying to be
oh
sexual. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
something that's just quite common now, if we see that, if you see somebody walking down the street, you'd be like, well, what's going on here? You try to
yeah,
cover your kid's eyes, and
that's
things
true.
things that are natural, like the body, have
Like
become
how
something to like
indigenous,
be ashamed about.
indigenous groups, they're fine with a loincloth. They're straight. And,
Correct.
and when you look at the notes from the colonizers, they'll say, words like savage or, yeah,
Right.
I got you. I got you.
And I always find that the cultures that covered up people the most always had the most perverted kind of things going on in the background.
My
You know,
Lord. Mm.
I'm not going to go too deep into that, but the
You
ones
try you
who
trying to cover you trying to cover me up when all you got all this going on over here. I got you. Yeah, I got you.
yeah.
Hmm. This is good. This is good. We haven't even talked about Spanish yet, but like I said, it's okay. You just give me so many good nuggets, and the viewer as well. And viewer, if you are clueless about the stuff we're talking about, the things we're mentioning, soca, feel free to Google it. That's what this is all about, learning.
Yes,
Not just
please,
talking about
please.
culture, the language, but learning the culture behind it. Okay, that's the last thing that I just want to know. What your last name is Skeete. What is that? What does that come from? What is that?
Oh, that's a great question, because even a lot of people with the last name don't even know that one. Um, it's funny. I haven't done the full research into it, but I actually bumped into a gentleman with my same name. Somebody was actually looking for him, and he worked at the Berklee College of Music, and at the time I was working at Berklee College of New York. Totally unrelated, but we both were like into music. He was the head of the music department, and of course, like I said, I was a musician and doing sound on the side. And so we just got to talking, and this gentleman kind of pointed me in the direction where I found the name came from either Scotland or Ireland, and it was a set of, I think, 7 or 8 brothers that, of course, either inherited or purchased land in the Caribbean, and I think one of them in like South America. Somebody came to the States, and so you find that last name to be prevalent in like Barbados, Trinidad. I know a lot of Guyanese folks have that last name as well, and then even some Southerners I've met. So
Wow.
of course, like anybody else, like Americans have Williams and Washington, and they all derive from some person that was a plantation owner or whatever. Same thing with Skeete. It's one of those names that just you know came down the pipeline. But
Yes,
whenever
sir.
I hear it, for the most part, I kind of always know the person has relation to like Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad. 75% of the time.
Thank you for that background lesson. And what I wanted to ask as a follow up to that question, then we really will get into Spanish. Did you get a lot of jokes when Lil Jon came out with the "Window to the Wall" song? And they say,
Of
"Oh,
course, I did. I actually I did. It's funny because depending on which era of my life, I had different type of jokes. Like when I grew up in the 80s, 90s. it was more like skeet shooting, which is a sport. So they're gonna be like, "Oh, you're gonna go shoot? You're gonna go shoot somebody? You're skeet shooting?" But Lil Jon, it's funny because for some people it might be embarrassing, but I think for me it was always a great conversation starter. You know, when the song came out, I was young, I was in my mid-20s, and so you can't go wrong with starting a conversation that deals with the subject matter they talk about in the song. So always good to get the laughs in the room, and I break the ice, and then it's good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I figured so. That's why I had to ask. Because, matter of fact, because of that song, I would imagine that, on Facebook, people make up like fake names. A person may think you're referring to that in your name, trying to be funny, not realizing it's really your name.
Some people have actually thought that. I mean, not now, but because, you have to have the real names more on Facebook. But it was a certain point in time. People were like, well, why, what's your real name? What's the C? What's the C stand for? What's your middle initial? Is that your real last name? So it's funny.
Yeah, I believe it. Okay. All right. So we will finally talk about Español. And it's not on the list, but it's something I just want to know I've experienced with you previously. And that's people considering you el profe. And I've witnessed that even in our conversations, because when I say something and it's wrong, you tell me it's wrong. You tell me why it's wrong. You tell me the history. So before we even talk about,
I can't believe you know this already.
Before we even talk about, how you got started learning, that's beginnings. I guess why have you enjoyed so much a more technical route? That's the best way I can form my question. Because for me, it's the exact opposite of me. I'm a dive-in learner. I didn't care about grammar. I was just trying to speak and wing it and be wrong and see and have somebody tell me what's wrong and learn it that way. But and for some and many people, the technicalities of the language scare them off. But it seems like, and I don't know, you can correct me, that maybe you gravitated toward the technicalities and you enjoy them. So I guess just talk about your relationship with the technicalities of Spanish, your thoughts. Was it easier, harder, and how it shaped you into how you are now?
That's a great question. Because I think initially I did approach language from a much more grammatically driven perspective. But like now when I'm speaking new languages, it's kind of a hybrid, I feel like when I start, I'm initially trying to mimic everything that a baby's doing, like it even ties into my Spanish story. When I started learning, my nephew, whose mom is Dominican, he was 5 at the time. And, I would struggle to figure out, why are they saying, puedo versus puede, and then what's pude and what's podía? I'm asking these questions. And I'd see my nephew, he'd ask his mom, because, the grandparents, they spoke English, but they preferred Spanish. So my nephew at 5, he's like, well, Mom, how do you say this? And she'll give him a couple of words, a phrase. And I noticed he would never ask what that meant. He just wants to
He's
know,
not worried about the why. He just needs the answer.
He needs the how and the when. He doesn't even know. He doesn't even care about the why. But then I also figured out that it's a strength to be an adult and to have the capacity to also understand the depth of what grammar is. It's one thing to just drive, like for me anyways, it's one thing to jump in the car and just to drive. But somewhere down this first street that I'm driving, I want to know if I should go left, right, or center. So I'm in the car already. I just jump right in, and I speak from day one. I don't have that fear that some people do. I think for me, speaking is probably the easiest thing. And I don't know if it's tied maybe to my hip hop. I've been rapping since I was 7 years old. So I had no problem getting in front of a crowd. Freestyle was one of my strengths. And so, pulling things from the air and not caring if it came out silly or came out perfectly, that was like something I had already done. So I think to some degree, it's a little bit of both. But to answer your question, I don't start languages like that. But at some point in the early stages, I do say, you know what, let me find out what the brick and the mortar kind of verbs are of this thing. What's the foundation? What's the who, what, where, why, and how kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Once I can say those basics, I can pretty much start with anything. And then I'll start to add on to the house of my language.
Yeah, that's good. I just took a class. I'm in graduate school for my master's in language, not because I feel like I need it, but I would like
That's
to teach.
amazing.
I would like to teach some college level classes, and so I got tired of hearing you have to have a master's in Spanish. I'm like, okay, fine, So that's why I'm in the program, and took a course a year ago from now in spring of 2020
Yeah.
about the history of the Spanish language, and so that opened up my understanding of comprehension of a lot of the why. So yeah, that's
Okay.
good. I'm not there. I still don't care too much. Like just the heart of me. I'm like, who cares? Because it's all about somebody. This group came in and they influenced the language a little bit. Then this other group came in and they influenced it, and I still don't care much. But at least
But
got me thinking more about the origins.
now you make sense though, and it's funny because you don't have to necessarily care about those things to learn the language at all. I think that just it depends on your personality. Like for me, I was always into etymology. I always like to know the history of words. And like that, this the same way that I tell people about the background of a word. I used to do that in English coming up, which is probably why I rapped all the time. I just loved words. And somebody would say a certain word, they'd say, synchronous, and I'd be like, well, that's related to synchronicity. And blah 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 blah. So I could see how that just came into the next language too.
Yeah, because
You know?
I see that more in Spanish than I do in English. Because I'll do that with my clients. Like, okay, that's a noun, but there's an adjective that looks real similar, and this will help you remember. So yeah, I can
It's
see how that
true.
helped early on, especially with Spanish.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, well, good stuff. Now let's kind of go into my normal setup.
Let's do it.
You probably told us some of these answers already in what we discussed. But why did you decide to learn Spanish? Why Spanish? You're in Nueva York, where excuse me to the viewers for background noise. That is my young son, but just have some patience with me. You're where there's a conglomeration of cultures, and I'm sure you could learn something else. But why Espanol?
There's a couple different reasons. Like I said, my dad, he played so much salsa in the house, and that was so like I initially heard the language through that, and then the fact that Trinidad itself is 7 miles from Venezuela at its closest point, and my family's from the south, like close to that. So you always hear them talking about Venezuela, the relation to Spanish. Our Christmas music in Trinidad is sang in Spanish. It's called parang, Parang, parang music. And so it just was a desire from young. I would see some of my uncles and my aunts, and they talk about, you can get work in Venezuela. They come back picking up a little bit of the language. So I think from 5 or 6, I was just intrigued because I was writing poems at like 6 years old. It's just words are like, I love them.
Yes, sir.
And so I couldn't believe that there was a whole other way to express yourself. I'm like, how could there be another set of words to say all of these things that I'm saying right now? Like, I haven't even learned all of these words yet. What do you mean there's another language? And it just sounded so beautiful. I think my next thing was that one of my best friends in second grade was a Puerto Rican gentleman, black kid that I grew up with. And I started to hang out at his house all the time. And one day I remember his mom was asking about me being there late and if I had to go home. And for whatever reason, I understood her. I was just around them for so long at this point. And I turned to her and I was like, it's okay. I don't have to leave until whatever time. And everyone in the room paused and they were like, did you understand that? And I think that initial shock of like, hey, I think I impressed everybody right now. And like, I honestly understood what she said. I don't know how I did it. She kept saying these same things to him every day. He would get in trouble for things, And I just picked up on it. And I told her, which is funny because she still tells the story to this day. I was like, one day I'm going to move to your islands and I'm going to learn Spanish. I'll be fluent.
You said so that then at that age or a couple years later?
No, I said that at that age, at second grade. And so I think at the time it was half joke. I believed in myself. Kids always say something they believe. But as time went on, I didn't think I was actually going to do it. I think I was just blessed to be in a space in a timing of my life to wake up one day and I was like, you know what? What about that childhood dream that I had? you know. And at the time I was working, of course, like you said, in New York. So I was running into situations that if I knew even a little bit of Spanish, it would have been so different for me. I would have been the man, you know, like at work, there were clients that would come in, and, you know, certain people I worked with would just create this different rapport because they could speak to them in their native language.
That's it.
You know, whereas I'm kind of sitting there, I'm nodding, I'm smiling, I have my suit and tie on, but I'm feeling like I'm behind. I'm left out in this thing. So, you know, I was 24 years old in the year I was going to be 25, and I just got serious about it. It just I just jumped right in.
That is a nice origin story, and I think that what you got from that experience of being in the Puerto Rican house young is something that takes some time for people to build. But even when I have clients and they'll say like, "I can understand, I just can't speak," it reminds me of that.
Yeah,
But the fact that you can understand, your brain has gotten to a certain point, and that's a great thing. That still shows growth. Some people beat themselves up, and not saying
I
you shouldn't progress, but the fact that your brain is starting to comprehend it, baby, you're partially there. So yeah.
I I agree with you. You know, I I saw an interview that you did where you guys were talking about the difficulties, you know, of like speaking versus listening, and I honestly think listening is the hardest skill,
Yes, sir.
because, you know, you have to deal with so many small nuances. I mean, we know this in America here. I can leave from New York and go to certain pockets of Florida or Texas, and I have to ask you to repeat yourself a couple of times, and we speak the same language. And
Mm.
it's not even because of slang. It's just, you know, maybe how you say the letter R at the end of a word, or maybe how I say it. You know, I'll say the door instead of the door. You know, I'll have it with the W.
God,
So
I got a good example. I got a good example. This is good because I am from the South, and I don't know if my voice or the way in which I'm speaking sounds different to you, but I hear that sometimes when I go to Chicago or something.
mhm.
And this Cedric the Entertainer had a Netflix special. I'm gonna make this short, but it's exactly what you're talking about. He said he visited his country cousins and he met this man and asked him his name. And he said what he heard was bumonicious. You know, he was like, bumonicious. So he had gone around all the time they're calling this man bumonicious as his name. And he said at some point somebody asked him, "Hey, what did you call him?" He said bumonicious. He said his name bumonicious. And they were like, "No, man, he's saying by my initials. People call me by my initials."
Oh my God.
But the way in which the man ran everything together, like you mentioned, people pronouncing R's a certain way, sounded like
Bumonicious.
bumonicious. So
Bumonicious.
I get it. I get it. And even with
Call me bumonicious. That's hilarious.
and so with your example, when you go to different parts of the US and you have to ask people to repeat themselves, but that doesn't make us think we don't know English. We still
Right.
adopt it. And so that's why I tell people just because you had a little moment or a slip up, don't reduce your confidence in your Spanish ability. It's just it's
Not at
always
all.
having to adapt and change depending on who you're talking to and where they're from.
In fact, if I can share something really quickly, um, you know, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead of some of your questions, but
Go ahead.
in, in my first year of learning, I began to volunteer after work. That was like one of my tricks. You know, I didn't have anybody around me to speak to. Everybody in my house speaks English kind of now. You know, it's just me and my son who really go back and forth with it. So I was like, well, how am I going to facilitate, you know, this whole thing and get some conversations? So I started to volunteer after work teaching ESL. So in my first 9 months, I got a good basic level of expressing myself and understanding it. But it was mostly Mexican and Central American Spanish. And then I decided to move to the DR, you know, at the time that I did. And my first month and a half down there, I totally lost all my confidence. I went from thinking I was hot stuff, good enough to move out the country. You know, I moved like coming to America. I quit my job, I quit everything, and I showed up to a town I had never been to before. You know, and I get there and I'm like, you know, I'm like, órale, ¿cómo estás? And they're like, oye, Moreno, ¿cómo tú estás? And I was like, wait, what? Excuse me, what?
All I heard was "como tú estás," like "how are you doing?" But I don't know what you just said at the beginning.
That's how I felt when I first got there. Right? I'm like, what are y'all talking about? So I thought I made the wrong decision. I was like, you know, I was in my bedroom studying. I'm like, maybe I'm not studying hard enough. I go out in the streets and they'll say something to me, and I had to realize it's how their accent is affecting the flow of words. You know, it wasn't me or some deficiency that I had. And so if I could tell, your viewers, that is just keep that confidence up, because just like in English, like we say, it might not necessarily be that you don't even know the word yet. It's just how it's being delivered to you.
That's it. That's it. This week, I went over with one of my clients a song. I try to, I always incorporate music, and sometimes I try to find what they like. So the client
Right.
likes Ozuna. I don't really know Ozuna. I don't know nothing, but I found a song with Yo por ti, mi, tú por mí, something like that.
See,
So we played it. We played the song, and he's like, I don't know anything they're saying. He knows a decent amount of Spanish. He was like, I was never listening to really the words, and I'm confused. So I'm going through the song myself, and I'm confused too. But as
right.
I'm looking at the word, they're cutting off a lot of the endings,
Yeah,
or the beginning of the word. Like with the
right.
example you gave, como tú estás, well,
Yeah,
ta
como tú
is just
estás.
the end of está. And so,
Right.
depending on once again who it is, how the way in which they like to say things, and that's especially being a black melanated, whatever you want to call it, it's similar to what we do. Instead of for FOR, for what? You know,
Right.
I think once I realized that it's still a challenge to learn some of the things people are saying, but I can relate because it's like Tasha, it's the same thing you and your family do with the British English.
Right. But it um I find it extremely interesting that whenever you look at Caribbean or coastal Spanish, or places that we have touched as a people and also have spoken Spanish, we tend to drop that S like that. Or I'd say aspirate it. It becomes like a soft kind of sound, like a soft H. Instead of like dos, we're gonna say do or tres. Yo quiero más, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but it's dope to listen for those things, because once you choose a particular island or country to learn from, you'll totally understand those things all the time. You just have to, choose one, grip onto it, specify, and just keep at that for a second. Because I always like to tell my students that I still teach that it's better to hone in on one culture within the Spanish language instead of try to learn, let's say, some of Spain, some from Colombia, some from Chile. And that would be exactly like someone learning English and like they're speaking one sentence is like a New Yorker, the next is from California, then a Chicago accent, then a British accent. You'd be like, I'm gonna go to the train and get some water. It'd be strange. You'd be mixing and matching styles here. So it's good to have at least a base to draw from.
That is a really good point. I don't know if anything changed on your end. The way in which you hear me, is it different? Because the way in which I'm hearing you sounds different. Like there's maybe something different with your mic. Did anything
No,
change on your end?
yo te escucho
And I
igual.
can still hear you. Okay, I can still hear you. It's all right. But that is a good point. And so I need to take that into account when of my teaching, because I never say I teach from any particular place. Like I know I don't teach Spaniard Spanish. I know that. And I probably do teach more Mexican Spanish without realizing it. Um, but that's a good point of telling a student focus on this one country, or I guess one country at a time. Get a base.
For true,
I,
because
I
I
like that.
found that once my ear was totally Dominican, everyone else sounded clearer.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Like it's like once I learned, hey y'all, then something like hey y'all, it's clear for me. Yeah, I can hear that. It's totally different, but I can hear it. So that's totally my advice. Get a country, a favorite one, and stick to it.
That's good. I've said that to clients before, and just I guess increasing their interest in the language. Like I'll tell people, find a celebrity or a musician or historic figure that you like. Because for me it was Celia, and so by liking Celia, I started connecting to the Cuban culture. So it just gave me something to even care about in the language. And then like when people now ask me, how do you know Spanish? I'll be like, oh, soy cubana. It's a joke, and then I'll clear it up that I'm not, but. I've told people that in reference to just finding a connection with the language, but I definitely like that to take it even farther and say not just a connection, but get your standardized way of speaking. So that'll help your foundation. That's good. Okay. Next up. So from what I'm hearing, because it's gonna take care of a couple of these questions. You just took a dive-in approach. You learned from life experience and then went to the DR to test it out, or like even the grammar and all that, was that self-study? You took a semester course? What?
All right. So the first thing I did, and I'll try to keep it short, but the story's a little all over the place, but I'll try to.
Look, you don't have an hour, but you have a decent amount of time. Don't feel rushed.
Okay. When I first started again, December 2004, I purchased an audio program called Learning Spanish Like Crazy.
Learning Spanish like what?
Like crazy.
And if I'm looking off, I'm getting something together for my son. I'm listening. So this isn't around. I ain't never heard of that. This is around what time?
This is it debuted in 2004, so I actually caught it in the first year that it came out. And let's say like a few weeks before that, I went to the library and I borrowed Pimsleur. One of those.
I've heard of that. I've heard of it. Even now, I've still heard a commercial from them. Yeah.
So it was just the first 8 lessons, but it showed me that I could learn at least a little bit totally from just listening and repeating. And, like I said, I was around my nephew at the time, and I'm like, well, that's what he's doing. Except I don't have a mom that's fluent in Spanish, so this program is going to be my parent, so to speak. So that was the first thing that I did. I got the Pimsleur. I found I could do the listen and repeat method, but it was a little formal. So I went online, and I was like something informal. And literally, that was like an iconic description for learning Spanish like crazy. It's like informal, everyday spoken Spanish. So I bought that, and I started to listen to it like a maniac. Sorry, my son.
No, it's okay. Look, mine's in here bouncing around. I get it. No.
And where's I in this story here?
You had gone from learning Spanish like crazy to Pimsleur. I think that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah, other order around. So I got the Pimsleur first. It was very usted oriented Spanish. It was very formal. So I was like, this is, there's got to be something a little bit more everyday than this. And I found the other program. I call it LSLC for short, Learning Spanish Like Crazy.
Oh, okay.
And so with LSLC, I began to jump in. I was studying every single day. There's about 30-minute lessons. They give you a conversation, and they expect you to kind of repeat it. The next day, they'll give you another lesson. Things they taught you in the previous lessons, they'll either build upon it, or they'll give you something that's not necessarily related, but when you get a few lessons in, it will increase the structure of what you're able to say. And then when I was about up to lesson 11 or 12, my sister-in-law, she was going back to the Dominican Republic with my brother for a quick vacation for 10 days. And she was like, hey, your brother told me that you're learning Spanish right now. Do you want to come here on vacation? And this is how my dream island switches from Puerto Rico to the DR. Because I go there for 10 days. They live in como en el campo, en un pueblo que se llama San Francisco de Macorís. So took us out there. As soon as we landed, I was up to this lesson about talking about bread. It was like, what kind of bread is this? Que tipo de pan is this? Something like that. And it took us from the airport. It's 4 a.m. We go directly to a baker's bread shop who they know is like a family friend. And he just finished making some loaves that he's going to sell for the day.
Wow.
So they're like, let's get some bread. And we go up to his door. And me, almost as if it was the real lesson. I'm like, oh man, I just learned this like yesterday, like how to say what kind of bread is this. So I said it. I was like, yeah, I was slower, of course. I was like, get people de pan, es eso. And everyone was like, they just looked at me, and they were like, John, because they call me John. They're like, John. They were like, your brother, English for him, no más English for you. And that was it. That was the last thing they said to me in English. They were like, no más English for you. And I'm like, hello? And they're like, oh, and they just start to They
That's
forced me.
so
I mean, I
nice.
struggled.
And
I
you
didn't do that.
you know, life has a funny way of connecting and repeating itself. You got that same reaction that you got when you were in second grade at your Puerto Rican friend's house.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? I realized those were the feelings that would drive me. Like it's an encouragement, you know. It's
That
like
wow, that awe, that surprise.
definitely
Yeah.
that shock of like, wait, excuse me. You know, how did you know this? And of course, my brother had been married to her for years at this point. You know, and they're like, you don't speak Spanish? She's like, no, he can understand. He can understand if you curse him out, but you know. So they were like, English for him, Spanish for you. And those 10 days were amazing. I mean, her cousins and her family took me around. They would have me playing dominoes with them, you know, meeting all the neighbors, saying hi to everybody, and just having to repeat those same basic phrases I knew. Within 10 days, I'm not going to say I was good, but small things, you know, I'm here playing cards and I'm just like, pásame la cerveza. I realized they kept saying, pásame. I'm like, okay, pass me, pásame la cerveza, dime, you know, dame. I'm starting to get those little, you know, the early commands, things that can make your needs get met. So I came back to America, of course, and I'm still working at the time. I was with a girlfriend for like 5 years at that point. And, you know, we were going through a breakup that summer. So broke up with her. I'm still thinking about the Spanish life. I'm still longing for it. And like, man, it was so cheap down there. Even when I ask people about the rent, I'm like, seems like it's like, you know, $200, $300. Good for the month. So one day I came to work and my boss it's like he could read me. He's like, man, you seem like your heart's just not into this.
Wow.
And I told him, I was like, you know, I feel like I could do so much more.
And at this point, you're kind of what, 30? If I'm keeping up with the numbers right of this story.
No, I was going to be 25. So matter of fact, I turned 25.
Oh, I'm way off. Okay.
That's all right. It's all right. And so I just keep it real with him. And God bless, he's just like, you know what? Like, no problem. You know, I'll do what I gotta do here. You know what I'm saying? Keep it a good reason. He's like, I don't want you to lose out on any unemployment or anything that you can get. So in those first few months when I didn't have anything to do in the daytime, I just spent my days studying Spanish, researching. I knew in my heart that I wanted to do it. You know, I would talk to my friends. Some of them thought I was crazy. Some encouraged me. And they're like, why would you pick up and leave? Like, where are you going? And I'm like, I don't know. I just, every time I wake up here, I'm in Queens. I'm just like, I don't want to be in this spot right now. Something's pulling me and I got to go.
And it is because of that experience in DR. That was a large
factor.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I know a lot of people, when they talk about the DR, they think about, you know, wild stuff, you know, women, rum, this kind of stuff. But totally for me, I mean, as you can tell, I have a love of words. So I just had so much of a real life experience in that 10 days. I was like, I think that I can learn the Spanish thing for real if I come here for like at least 30 to 90 days. And that was it. So, you know, from when I left from work that September till November, I left the day after Thanksgiving. So I booked my ticket in October and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Because like I said, it's coming to America. Even though my sister had her family in San Francisco, I didn't want to be anywhere near anyone that I knew. I was like, that's going to be a crutch for me.
Whoa, you know? That is a big leap.
Yeah, and also I think because I'm the youngest of my family, and I've always been a traveler. But up until that point, I don't think I had traveled anywhere where I wasn't about 20 miles or less from somebody that I knew, an uncle, a cousin, a family friend. And I was like, you know what? I want to go somewhere in the world where I totally have to make it on my own. Like I literally have to take a swim. You know, I don't want
to make your own study abroad program. You didn't.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want the option. I didn't want the option to be able to like lean on somebody else. And, you know, I'm like, I'm gonna make myself win. So I just picked the town. I found an apartment. The price was right. You know, I went to look up a school because I'm like, I'm doing all this studying, and in fact, it's funny because this is one of the books that I use to study right here. I don't know if we.
Which company is that by? Barron's?
Devney Richmond McGraw-Hill.
Okay.
And I picked this up on my own, actually, just doing research. But I called up the school And they're like, yeah, we have certain materials, blah, 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 blah. They told me they had that same book. The school was located 1 block from the apartment that I had found.
Oh.
And I was like, God's talking to me. He's got to be telling me something. So I literally landed out there knowing nobody. I paid down my rent for 30 days and I thought I'd be coming back soon. But it changed my entire life. Like I said, for the first few weeks, I didn't know what I was doing in terms of the Dominican accent. It was going crazy over there. But one thing I could say is that Dominicans and Haitians and others that live down there, they love to learn. They love to learn. And I mentioned that I taught ESL to like one person. And he was like, oh, but can you give me classes? ¿Tú me puedes dar clase? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. I don't know what the rates are. So I went to a local school. I found out what they charged for the English was like 5,000 pesos at the time. And that was expensive for the local Dominicans and Haitian out there. So I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll charge you 1,000 pesos if you can bring me 4 more people with you.
Oh, business.
So in my second week now, I'm here charging pretty much the same amount that a school is charging locally for one person, but I'm doing it for 5. But I'm making the same amount. You're still doing my 45 minutes to an hour of class. And because of the word of mouth, within like 2 weeks, I had 30 students.
Come on, entrepreneurship abroad.
Because everybody's just like, it's like, yo, I can pay pretty much 1/5, of what the school is charging right now. And all I got to do is bring more people with me. So that was their incentive to get a bunch of people and say, hey, man, look, let's make these classes cheaper for each other. Let's go to this guy. And I think my benefit at the time was I was young. So it's like they're learning standard English, they're learning slang, they're learning hip hop. I could have done it all in that sense. And my Spanish wasn't the greatest yet, but it was good enough to express everything that they needed to know for my language. And I was just like, I'm going to do this until I become fluent. So I literally did that for about a year. Once my Spanish was good enough, I flipped it. I took on the expats or the European and American immigrants, as I like to call them. And I charged them U.S. rates, about $15 an hour, sometimes more. And the same deal, you got to bring 4 people with you. So I was just so used to that. You got to come with 5. I need 5 people to make this lucrative. And I was making enough to just stay.
So you made your own job out of
made my own job.
This is so cool. This is such a great story. So how long, because we are about to wrap up.
Yes.
How long were you in DR? And then my extra question is, where else have you been? Because a quick look at your Facebook page, not saying I'm a stalker or anything, but it looks like you've been like all around the world, like the song, been around the world. I like the story of life. So number one, how long were you in DR?
I would go back and forth. The first time I stayed 6 months. The next time was about 7 to 8. Then I would go for a year. Altogether, across 3 years, I spent 24 and a half months.
So a little over a year. Okay. I'm sorry, a little over 2 years. My apologies.
A little over 2 years. Yeah. The last period of time I stayed there was 11 and a half months straight. Because I would come to New York every now and then, what I would call vacations to America or whatever. Stack a little bit of money, see family, file taxes, things like that. I'd be back in February, and then back in the island before I feel the cold.
And before, oh yeah, because I imagine that New York cold ain't in the play, but I don't even like the cold weather here in Arkansas.
Terrible.
Before we get to the other question, I just asked another that just came to mind. A lot of times, because I don't even think I've been to I went to the Caribbean on a cruise one time, but nothing deep. But everywhere I've gone, the Spanish speaking, I stand out because I'm melanated, right? And that's common for many of the guests on this program. However, you went to a Caribbean place, a place where Dominicans are known,
yes,
for Latinos. So you didn't experience sticking out like a sore thumb, or did you?
Experience
sticking out like a sore thumb, or did you?
I did, but it's because of how I chose my fashion at the time. If I had braids or like a low haircut, I would have totally passed for a local Dominican or Haitian, but that was the first year I started to lock my hair up like this. So that was just like it stood out in that town. I was the only kid. It was so short. It was still kind of growing out and spiking out a little bit. So they'd be like, "Who is this kid with that style? Like, what? Like, who is that?" Because nobody else is doing that like that. And I think just my age. Once people found out that I was from America and I wasn't like 50 and retired, and I wasn't like the child of some like trust fund.
Yeah.
I wasn't rich or anything like that. It was an anomaly for them in that sense. Like you left from your parents left from the islands to go to America. You left from America to come back to the islands. For that kind of thing. But I can say this much. It was culture shock to leave from there and come back to New York. I actually speak less Spanish here because, of course, Dominicans come in all colors. So outside of my hair, once I get to speaking, it was something regular. But I find, depending on who I'm around here, and I won't specify any countries, but like if I start to speak, they'll be like, boca abierta, the mouth open, just kind of like, and like they'll force me to explain my story of how I speak Spanish. So it had gotten to a point where I just started to lie for a time. I love Costa Rica, to answer your question about travel.
Yeah.
And I knew that a lot of people from Limon would say like pura vida. And they have like locks in Limon, Panamanians too, Honduran.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, let me say I'm from that region, because they would always try to guess that about me anyways. They were like, oye, ¿cómo tú hablas español entonces? ¿Tú eres de Panamá? Hondureño? ¿Cómo tú eres? And they'd be like, Costarricense? So I'd be like, sí, de Costa Rica, pura vida. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And it's like, once I did that, they would totally treat me normal. Wow. So like sometimes just for people to deal with me and me not have to explain how I've gotten to a level of fluency, I'll just say, look, I'm Spanish. My mom is Panamanian or whatever. My dad's Costa Rican. And then they leave me alone about it. I don't always do that nowadays, but there was a time when I was big on that.
I get it, because I imagine it can get exhausting to have to explain yourself all the time.
Claro, y por el acento también, porque mi acento es bien dominicano. Entonces, todo el mundo me pregunta, dice, they were like, yeah, you speak Spanish, pero tú tienes algo muy, like, there's something Dominican in your accent, so I have to explain that, because they don't know too many Dominicans with locks.
I got
so that's another thing, they were like, what's going on here? You look Panamanian or Jamaican, you sound Dominican. Then when you speak, I hear you're from New York. They're just like, you mixed up. What are you?
Yeah. I'm sure it can get annoying. I'm sure it can. I didn't stick with my Cuban. Now, one time I told somebody I was from Cuba, and I stuck with it when I went to a different country, because I was reminded, hey, Tasha, not everybody likes Americans. I said, you sure right? I'm not about to get kidnapped. Let me say I'm Cuban. Let me say I'm Cuban.
You could totally pass for a Cuban, though. Totally. I was there in
2017.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Especially in Santiago de Cuba. Allá tiene tanta gente africana. And even the accent, I was going to say, hasta el acento. Even the accent has something very familiar to it. Like when I was in Havana, por ejemplo, now you got me speaking Spanglish here. I'm mixing it up there.
English, so the viewers can get it. So they can get it.
When I was in Havana, anytime I would talk, they would ask if I'm from Santiago de Cuba. And when I asked why do people keep asking me this? And they'd be like, well, most of the people with your hair, the rastas and the black people are down there. And somebody else explained to me, like 50 years or more ago, there were a lot of influx of people from Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So the accent, that region, is closer to what they consider like Dominican Spanish kind of thing. So when I would talk, they would just automatically assume, well, maybe he's from that region over there, because his accent kind of has that thing. I think it's the blackness.
Well, I just typed that in, so that's something else I'll look up after our interview. Okay, good. Well, good. I'm glad I could pass as Cuban, and now I'm gonna remember this name of this city, so I can say I'm from there. So. Got it. Well, this has been excelente, Shaun. I thank you for your patience. I thank you, the viewer, for your patience as far as my son and background noises and interruptions. But thank you, Shaun. I'm glad we were finally able to get this together. It's been a long time coming. And
Yes,
you've come with so much. I only asked 2 or 3 questions from my list because you come with so many great life experiences, and we just touched the surface.
thank
I
you
believe
so much.
what you bring. So thank you for your existence and what you do. And the way in which you're
Thank you.
contributing to diversification of foreign language learning. So let's go on and end with your English introduction. So viewer, some things, we ad-lib. We added some more stuff to his introduction, but let's see what you remember. What did you catch earlier? Feel free to pause, rewind, whatever you need to do.
Yes,
And
yes.
and let's see what you got right. So Shaun, we know your name is Shaun. Where are you from?
I am from Queens, New York, born, and I am Trinidadian by blood, as I say, by heart. My culturalization in the house was always in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. All right, next up, your job or jobs. What do you do?
I am a live sound engineer. I work in events and shows, and I also work with computers, dealing with artificial intelligence, and some companies doing some stuff like that, NDAs and things that I can't mention.
I got you. I got you. Secretos or secretos.
Yeah, but AI and like machine learning, that kind of stuff.
Yes, sir. The world take over. That's how I feel. But anyway,
Basically.
all right. I didn't ask you this. I'm so sorry. I knew my intro seemed short with you, or shorter. Your pastimes. What are you doing? You can say this in English. What are you doing in your spare time? Your pastime.
Well, I still write. I do a lot of poetry. I have a series online right now that I'm going to be releasing some stuff for, but I do publish every Sunday, usually on Facebook, IG. It's called 6 Word Sundays. So if
Mm-hmm.
people want to maybe check that out, they can hashtag 6 Word Sundays or Domingos de Seis Palabras también.
Okay.
They could do it in Spanish. I still make music on the side. I deal with I'm in the creative space, to be honest with you. Like right now, I'm filming some small videos, like kind of like mini movies. I don't want to give too much details, but so I spend most of my hobby and my downtime just trying to create things. I
Okay.
think that's the main vein of what I do.
Okay. Good. Good. Letting those creative juices flow.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right. Next up, tell us about your family.
Well, is that from the questions from earlier?
Yes,
Am
sir.
I
At the
okay?
beginning. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, of course, I said that the lovely lady in my life, um, she is Jamaican.
Mm-hmm.
My son, he's 8 years old. He has family from Costa Rica, from Limon. So we're definitely like the United Nations in this house. It's a Trini, Jamaican, Costa Rican affair, and
Yeah.
as everything that you would think comes with that. From the food and the spices to we having roti.
Smell.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
everything, the music, like reggae music, soca music. We have peas and rice in the house, or rice and peas, as she would say, because Jamaicans and Trinidad say it differently. Um, so I mean, my family they're the greatest.
That's
They
beautiful.
really are.
Born in diversity and it's still happening in your household now.
Definitely.
All right. Your favorite well, we went through several songs, but off the top of your head, just some favorites
I
Spanish
believe I
speaking
tell you,
songs.
mi primer beso,
Yes, sir. I have
right?
it up
My,
here to look
my
up later.
first kiss. I'm gonna play that song. That's probably as soon as we hang up too. I always love to hear that.
Okay.
I There was some that I didn't get to mention, but I believe I said for salsa llorará.
Correcto, sí. Oscar de León.
Yeah, Oscar de Leon. There's so many salsa songs that I love. I mean, if your viewers can go check out El Gran Combo, one of the
Oh,
songs I learned even in my first year. I learned the lyrics and it helped my Spanish.
de
It's a
Puerto Rico.
song. Sí, claro que sí. Es una canción que se llama. It's a song that's called La Loma del Tamarindo, the
Mm,
Tamarind Hill, La Loma del Tamarindo. and it's like 4 verses. They're very short, but the words that they use in that, some are very, intelligent, well said words that I've I've included in my Spanish lexicon, if you will. And every time I use them, people are like, "Well, how do you even know that word? Like, what is like that? Like, have you learned it, or are you born into it? Like, So that's one of
So
those
you saying
songs
it's
that,
more advanced vocabulary? Am I hearing that right?
yeah, you'll get some good ones. You get like words like childhood, working hard. He talks about his dad having to bust his hump to pay the bills and put bread on the table. It's dope.
Okay,
But of
thank you.
course,
You give me so
it's
much to listen.
danceable. No problem.
Always, siempre. I have
And I
not
think
yet, and I can't speak on, what I don't know, but listening to different artists, I've not yet heard a song that just made me say, I just want to sit and think about it or sit and,
right,
and cry. Once again, we were talking earlier, some of the songs, the subject may be worth crying, but it's like, that's not the emotion.
totally
That's not the
right,
first response I have. So I would say you always going to want to dance to something.
correct.
Yeah.
For I think merengue, I told them Moreno Negron. For it's a
Uh,
song called "They Are Bad Birds." Son pájaro malo.
yes, you did mention that one. And then for bachata, wait a minute, don't tell me. Nah, that's not it. Okay, I guess you got to tell me. Or did we already do
But
bachata?
no, the bachata was the primer beso.
Okay, okay. And then llorarás, and then okay, I see it here
Yeah,
in the order you said it. Okay. Woo, I have so much to learn today. So much to listen to. All right, and last but not least, and this is where we really connected. Your
okay.
favorite Spanish speaking singer.
Well, my favorite Spanish speaking singer would have to be Hector Lavoe.
That's it, el cantante de los cantantes. Did
Yeah,
you? How did you even come? I didn't ask you this, but how did you learn about him? Like just one day you heard a song, or was somebody introduced you to him, or what happened?
it's funny because I actually had heard of Willie Colon before Hector Lavoe, and
Mhm.
I have one of his albums, the Willie Colon album, because like I said, I got my dad's collection. So one day I'm listening to the radio and Mi Gente came on, the one that Mark Anthony made over.
Mhm.
And I was just like, what is this? I start researching the guy, and it's almost like sometimes when you don't know a word or a name, and then when you learn it, you see it all the time.
Mhm.
Like the very next year, I saw it announced that there was a movie going to be made about this guy's life, and I was like, oh, I got to check this thing out. And so I saw the movie, I bought that soundtrack, and that just opened me up so much more
Yeah.
than that one song, Mi Gente. I was like, wow. So like El Cantante is una canción like that it touches my
Yo
soul.
soy el
El
cantante.
Cantante.
Blah 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 blah. I didn't. That's all I got. I didn't. I didn't try to learn after that. But anyway, yeah.
Ay, santo. No, pero como él canta la canción es muy único.
And I can
Um,
relate on that. Excuse me, interrupt you. I can relate because that video, even though I looked at some comments and some reviews, and people were saying, that was really an insult to his life, and but that representation is what really made me stick to him. And then, of course, listen to
yeah,
the music myself. But that was my initial. I don't even remember how I heard his name. But I do remember my first in-depth introduction to him was that representation with Mark Anthony and J Lo. So yeah.
nice.
All right. I interrupted you with something you were gonna say.
No, I was just saying that I think that people like Hector Lavoe and like Ruben Blades, that era of music is so amazing. They don't even make that sound anymore.
They
I was
don't,
listening
and that's
to
for me. I can need to stop interrupting. Okay, son. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
no, don't worry, it's your show, man. Come on. Do you know the song Pedro Navaja? Pedro
No, sir.
Navaja.
No, sir.
I'm gonna send you a couple of links. It's a story from Ruben Blades that he wrote. He wrote a lot of good songs. He wrote El Cantante, I believe, too, for Hector Lavoe.
Mhm.
It's a story that it's like about to start speaking Spanish. It's about a guy in the neighborhood who is always trying to stick people up, and one day he
Uh-oh.
just chooses the wrong old lady one day, and I'll leave it there.
Pedro, ¿qué? Navarra?
Pedro It's a word for blade, navaja, navaja.
Oh yeah, please do. And you know, I don't know much about Ruben, but I end up watching. Oh, my son took it away from here, but it's the last thing, because I we could talk all day, but I end up watching a PBS documentary about what it's called. It's called Latin Music USA. So it
Mhm.
ended up interviewing Ruben. Of course, it talks about Hector. So Ruben talked about how he met Hector, things like that. And I didn't even know too much about Ruben and his influence. But yeah, please send that over so I can learn.
I
Yeah,
sure will,
this
man.
has been great. Un placer. I appreciate you. To you, the viewer, I know you got some good nuggets today. If nothing else, just about cultural and life experience. And Shaun, I can't say gracias enough.
No, también, gracias por invitarme a tu show. Me gocé mucho. It was good.
Sí, gracias a ti, profe. Okay. All right. Take care. Thank you, viewers. Be sure to like, subscribe, and the whole nine. Okay. Bye.
Hasta la próxima. Chao.